Well, it was a day of surprises and somewhat a rude awakening for the ANC as the party lost key metros, including the City of Ekurhuleni, as well as the highly contested City of Johannesburg. This through what looks like opposition parties having agreed to collectively vote the ANC out of power, despite not having had formal agreements or coalition talks to do so. Now, despite having lost the Nelson Mandela Bay Metro to the ANC, the DA came out the overall winner last night in key metros in Gauteng. It remains to be seen how the City of Tshwane council sitting will vote, and that's later today, as well as Ethekwini in KwaZulu-Natal. That's also a very interesting one, which is expected to reconvene on Wednesday, not today. So to help us unpack some of these developments, we are joined by political analyst Dr. Ralph Mathekga. Good morning. How are you feeling this morning? I mean, are you digesting this information? I know you haven't had breakfast yet, but this information, I'm sure, serves as a lot of breakfast for you.
Indeed, Leon, good morning to viewers at home. It's been quite a night full of surprises. I mean, I was writing my article. I've had to look at it a few times because the night things just kept on happening and happening, Leon, and big surprises there. I mean, who would have thought that the ANC would be kicked out of what I consider their comfort zone in Gauteng, which is Ekurhuleni. I mean, all of these things happening, no one could have written this script. It's actually stranger than fiction, as they say.
Yeah, certainly. And I mean, let's talk about this now, because, you know, we cannot misinterpret this for coalitions, because this is not a coalition. And I think that's what we need to address right up front in this conversation. So talk to me about what is actually happening here.
Actually, this has been very interesting, Leon. I mean, the first talks around the possibility of putting coalition among the opposition parties, actually, they collapsed. And when the decisions were made to actually go into council, convene council, I remember when it comes to the City of Johannesburg, the DA almost like went it alone to say that, look, we've got our own mayoral candidate. It was very clear that the opposition parties are not going to work together to form a coalition. But even if they failed to agree on coalition, there is something that seems to have held them together, something that seems to have presided last night, which is the common willingness to kick the ANC out of power. This is what we have seen happening across the municipalities. It is what has happened. The ANC is out of power. But what we don't know is what will the vote impact, or if it is a vote impact at all, that has seen the ANC losing Ekurhuleni, possibly Johannesburg, possibly Tshwane as well. That vote impact among the opposition parties, we don't know, Leon, how is it going to hold. It is an agreement to kick the ANC out, but it's not an agreement for cooperation. I was listening to Mr. Mashaba coming out very clear that even if they are disappointed at the DA, they thought that the DA's conduct will result in the ANC coming back. That on its own resulted in Action SA and even the EFF rewarding the DA, giving the DA mayoral position in those metros. I wonder, on what condition? I wonder, how do you sustain this agreement? I wonder, Leon, if you now go back as the DA and you start to work your way back and negotiate the coalition after voting on a formation of government. Very strange indeed.
Yeah, it certainly is, and it's going to be a sort of back to the drawing board here, because, you know, this is now, we've got to see how this is going to actually work out and understand who the real winners are here. And that's a big question that we need to ask. Who are the real winners? Yes, we see the DA taking in Gauteng these mayoral chains, but I mean, the road ahead for them, I can't imagine it's going to be a very smooth one at all.
It's quite interesting indeed. I mean, the DA woke up in charge of Ekurhuleni. And they were even surprised themselves from the comments that are being made. The mayor-elect, Tanya Campbell, she said they were shocked about what has happened. And indeed, the question is now, how do you proceed? I mean, you have received what other parties are calling it a reluctant vote. I mean, Action SA is calling their vote to support the DA a reluctant vote. The goal is aimed at removing the ANC. And now, how does the DA proceed? Do they humble themselves and try to talk to those coalition? I won't even call them coalition partners, and I'll call them voting partners, if you like, in the council. You talk to them and you start to work an agreement try to work your way back, try to find a way in which you hold this thing, because there is no agreement here regarding how to control those council. The only thing the DA knows is that they have got the mayor's position, they can constitute council, but under what condition will their council survive? What is there to be achieved? What is it that the opposition parties even want besides just removing the ANC? What is it that we're going to see being demanded by the opposition parties? And I think as well, this is where the uncertainty comes in here, that even if the dominant party has been removed in all of this, the lack of accord among the opposition that have pulled off this means that they have to work very, very hard to make something of what they've achieved last night. I don't think they are aware of what they have achieved in terms of the potential of forming government. They can still find their way back, Leanne, and negotiate this coalition. They don't have to just proceed to say, we've voted the ANC out and that's how we continue. But that is where a lot of work is demanded now. We're going to see the DA having to humble themselves. They are in charge of council now. They cannot negotiate as if they are trying to be in charge of council. They're already in charge in some areas. They will have to see how they keep those other opposition parties at bay, keep them around, make sure they don't go to the ANC. Remember, those who have given the DA the council, we don't know what is the condition for the DA to retain this control. The possibility is that you might have a tumultuous, a very unstable term in those municipalities, as we have seen in those metros, as we've seen since 2016 local government election there.
Yeah, interesting. You know, but and while you're talking, I'm in my head asking the question, and I'm being very selfish, and perhaps I'm being selfish for, 27 million other South Africans as well. What does it mean for us? You know, I mean, yeah, I went out and voted, and okay, great. So we're asking who the real winners are here. So who are the winners? I mean, are we as voters the winners, or is it again just a political game that we're falling victim to?
Leon, I'm worried about the consideration for the voters here. I mean, I see very egotistically driven leaders here who actually seems to be very much interested in the power game. And I think if they de-escalate this a little bit and start to think about what message are we sending to the voters, of course, they will say that the voters wanted the ANC out of power. If the voters completely wanted that, they would not have rewarded the ANC with relatively higher vote. And I do think that the voters actually want co-governance. I've heard some among the opposition talking about co-governance, which is sharing power, which is committing to common project under this coalition, whatever you call them, the voting pact agreement. But I don't see that coming out. It seems as if now it has become a power exchange. One party is no longer in power. There are others that are in power. But at the end of the day, there isn't much about what will accrue to the voters. What is it that will go to the voters? The voters want cooperation. The voters want co-governance. I don't think the voters want any party to go unilateral in those metros. I wonder if those that have voted for what has happened last night, they will have that humility to come back and say, when it's all said and done, can we try to work out something, a functional administration in those councils, so that at least the voters can benefit from what has happened? I think the voters have foreseen this happening, and it has to work in the interest of the voters. If it's just a power exchange, power bargaining by power brokers, it will not survive. It will not benefit South Africa's politics.
You know, Ralph, you've previously said that the smaller parties carry more moral weight at this stage of the negotiations. Is that what is manifested and sees the ANC losing power in such critical metros?
I mean, Leon, this is the problem with South African politics where it is now. I think we are experiencing fragmentation at the center of our politics. Fragmentation whereby even if you look at these smaller parties, they've come out morally strong. They've been rewarded with relatively better votes, but still not enough to constitute council. But if you look at where they stand, some of them have pushed that moral position to be saying that it means they cannot work with certain parties. Some have said their moral position means they cannot work with the ANC. But the reality, though, Leon, is that a balance is required here because they don't have sufficient votes to constitute council on their own. They will have to work with others. They might be pushed in some areas, even if they don't like, to work with the very same ANC that they say they do not want to work with. So the ANC, on the other hand, it has got numbers. The bigger parties have got numbers, not just the ANC. Bigger parties are bringing in more numbers. But I do think they are morally weak because they've been part of the system of failed local government, some to a certain extent and some to a greater extent. Some have been part of the failed coalitions. So I do think that the smaller parties are being careful as to the extent to which they associate with what we are about to see in council. We don't know what we are about to see. I'm hoping we're going to see a little bit of stability, but there is a worry that the dominant parties might engage in power exchange as we have seen since 2016. That is what might compromise the moral position of your small parties such as the Action South Africa, for example, those parties that have come out to try to harvest that renewal, maybe that trust that is emerging amidst lack of trust in South Africa's politics.
You know, the DA, as we have said, seems to have come out tops. I mean, we're still waiting to see what happens in Tshwane. That should be the results coming out today. And also looking at Ethekwini, I mean, obviously there was a lot of chaos that unfolded yesterday. We'll see perhaps the vote coming tomorrow or a result coming out tomorrow. So, okay, DA coming out tops in the Gauteng municipalities, albeit at the behest of the opposition parties. What impact could this have on the running of these municipalities, given that there are no guarantees that these opposition parties will actually continue voting with the DA?
I mean, the first problem is when you start benefiting from a vote that is actually not meant for you, but meant to punish someone. This is what installed the DA in council. We should not forget that the DA failed to persuade opposition parties to rally around. They failed to preside upon opposition parties and try to convince them. So they've got this protest vote that they have now backed. It's a question of trying to translate it into something else, from a protest vote to a vote that can actually be used. And I think that is why my view here is that this is not a moment to pop the champagne. It is a moment to call an urgent meeting and even ask, why did you vote for me? Why did you help me? Was it a setup so that maybe later in the middle of council, in the middle of the term, you will demand certain things? If I fail to deliver, therefore it's over. The DA need to be asking those tough questions. And my view, Leon, is very simple. You just negotiate your way back. You look at this vote. You cannot pretend to be asleep in all of this. You have to understand how you got that vote and try to translate it into something else. Reground the political relation that resulted in the vote of protest and try to make something positive out of it as the DA. But that requires humility, and the DA has got no history of succeeding in coalitions that they do not dominate.
Yeah. I want to quickly talk to KZN because there was a lot that happened there yesterday and a lot of chaos unfolded. So my sort of question to you is it seems like the IFP and ANC arrangement has just fallen flat on its face. Surely this means that the ANC could possibly lose the Ethekwini Metro as well.
It's another possibility there. I mean, imagine the ANC struggling to hold to some of the areas where it used to be relatively comfortable compared to your Gauteng. So the IFP seems to have reneged on the agreement with the ANC. But interestingly as well, which could say something about what might come in Tshwane because of the surprise night, is that it appears as if in Ethekwini, someone preempted what could happen and they disrupted the city. We could see something like this happening in Tshwane because Tshwane being pretty much the last one in Gauteng, parties will try to preempt what will happen. If parties feel uncomfortable about the potential result, I don't think they will wait for surprises. They just might be attempt to actually disrupt Tshwane. What has happened in Ethekwini might be attempted in Tshwane by those that feel uncomfortable about the possible result from that.
How are the ANC going to explain this away? I mean, it's a tough and very bitter pill to swallow. I know they're going to. I mean, that goes without say. But, I mean, you know, this is a tough one. What do you think?
I mean, Leon, one thing about the ANC is that they're not really such a bad loser. They will try to disrupt council in areas where they have lost. But they don't use extrajudicial measures. They do it democratically, motion of no confidence and so forth. So if there is anything I can give to the ANC is how they are acclimatizing to becoming an opposition. They're doing a good job for themselves.
Yeah. What about the leadership within? Let's quickly look at our new Joburg mayor. I mean, Dr. Mpho Phalatse. What do you think? Is she strong enough for this position? I mean, it's a tough one. I mean, we saw Herman Mashaba coming in, and obviously there was a lot happening behind the scenes when he was mayor. But, you know, Dr. Phalatse, do you think she has what it takes?
I think she has been in council around for a while. She has been in council. She has even earned her own personal controversy around the comment on Israel, came out of it. So I would say that she is becoming a seasoned politician at that stage. And I think that also younger people and a woman in that position as well is a very strong message that says that gone are the days of the big man in council. And I mean, Leon, what have they achieved in any case? I mean, if you bring Dr. Phalatse in there, you compare her with what has happened in the past, I don't think there's been a stellar performance in the past that will actually cast a bad spotlight on her potential performance in council. It's up for take, and I think younger people should go out there and experiment with leadership principles in council, and that's a way to go, in my view.
All right, let's leave it there. Ralph, thank you. Always a pleasure speaking to you. Dr. Ralph Mathekga, political analyst, talking to us about some of the developments from last night and, well, yesterday, the whole of yesterday, not just last night. We just saw some of the results coming in last night. And, of course, today, I think is going to be very much so the same. But thanks again for your time. It's 7 o'clock. Let's get into our news bulletin.